with the focus that has been now brought with regard to the hospital that has been attacked in Gaza. Now, of course, Hamas are in Palestine. There has been a quick mention that it was an Israeli airstrike. But Israel also has countered it, said this strike has not been by Israel. Who is speaking this time, the reality of what has unfolded? Joining me now is the Israel Defense Forces spokesperson, Jonathan Conricus, and he has been speaking constantly on social media as well, stating that this is not Israel. Jonathan, can you put it in perspective that the footage that the IDF is also releasing with the radar footage, and why is it saying that this is not an Israeli strike? Because earlier, right away when the hospital was attacked, the quick mention that came in from the authorities in Palestine, in Gaza Strip, was that this was an Israeli strike.
Yes, hello, thank you for having me. Allow me to give some context first.
Sure.
We're fighting Hamas, and they are not the standard military. They have weapons that are not standard level, many of whom are manufactured inside Gaza and often misfire. Hamas has been firing thousands of rockets at Israeli civilians, and what occurred a few hours ago in Israel, or actually at 7 p.m. Yesterday, was that a rocket fired by another terrorist organization called the Islamic Jihad misfired, partially exploded in the air, and then landed on the ground and exploded on the ground close to that hospital in Gaza City. We have been able to reach that conclusion by looking at radar footage, by analyzing our own activity to make sure that we did not have any military activity in that area at that time, and also by looking at visuals, a UAV footage that we have now taken and analyzed to see and confirm that it was not an Israeli strike, and corroborate it with other sources of information indicating that it was in fact a misfire by other terrorists.
Jonathan, because of course the first question is being targeted against Israel too, that is this now a targeting of even hospitals, because that has led to immediate outrage, criticism, protests in many parts of the world as well, and Palestine is saying that this is specifically targeting civilian neighborhood. What do you say to that?
Yes, I've seen those reports, and the first thing I would like to say is that one should be extremely cautious and skeptical when taking information coming out of Gaza, even if it is so-called official information, because all of the authorities in Gaza are controlled by the terrorist organization Hamas. Hamas is an organization that abducts, murders, rapes, and mutilates. That's the organization. And they have zero credibility. They have lied many times in the past, and they have a proven track record of lying when it comes to trying to create events that make Israel look bad. So that's the first thing. I was very disappointed to see many Western media outlets immediately adopt the information coming out of Hamas-controlled Gaza without verifying it, without cross-checking it, and just saying Israel strikes a hospital. That is not true, and that is not proper journalism. I expect each journalist to hold Hamas and the Palestinians to the same standards that they hold us. If they want verification and proof from us, they should have verification and proof from Hamas as well.
Jonathan, at this time, the fact remains that hundreds of civilians have lost their life in Palestine, in Israel, of course, too. Also, many are held hostages. And US President Joe Biden is set to arrive in Israel anytime, but the Amman summit has got cancelled. The Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas does not want to meet. But this could have been a moment of a ceasefire, or at least some sort of a resolution could have been brought in, at least for a temporary basis, so that death toll does not increase. But now it looks like that option is also out.
Yeah, I don't think a ceasefire was in the cards, because we are moving ahead and we are very committed and determined to complete our military goals, to completely dismantle Hamas from a military point of view, and to make sure that the atrocities that descended upon Israel on October the 7th, killing more than 1,000 Israeli civilians and 300 soldiers, never occur again.
And also, I do have a question here because this time it's this specific attack on the hospital has been about claims and counterclaims. And right now, you are saying that there is radar footage and there is evidence that this was not Israel. But why would you say that Hamas or Islamic Jihad, as you are mentioning, would fire a rocket that hit a hospital too? Because how does that help Hamas? Their own civilians are also dying at this point.
Yes, that's why we said that it was a misfire. The rocket was intended to hit our civilians. It was intended to strike into Israel, but there was a malfunction of the rocket and it exploded shortly after taking off. It was fired from close to the location of the hospital. It was fired, went up in the air, and this can be seen on Al Jazeera footage, not Israeli footage. Al Jazeera were kind enough to show it to the world. It exploded in midair and then landed on the ground and caused a big explosion. It wasn't intentional by the Palestinians. It was a misfire.
Jonathan, you mentioned that ceasefire was really not an option, that you are going ahead with the ground attack as well. But we do see a slight delay in it. There have been warnings constantly for evacuation to the Palestinians. Can you tell us, maybe not operational details, of course, but what about this ground attack? What is the IDF plan of action right now? Because many have said that perhaps that is not the right way to go and it shouldn't be done. It could lead to further casualties too. So what is the IDF plan of that at this juncture?
Yes, we intend to dismantle Hamas militarily by the various means that we have at our disposal. Ground invasion is definitely one of them. And we will execute that ground invasion when it suits our strategic and tactical objectives and when the conditions are right. So nothing is off the table. We are preparing, collecting intelligence. In the meanwhile, we are striking the enemy. We are degrading Hamas and its military capabilities, making it weaker. We are hunting their commandos and striking quite a lot of command centers, their logistic capabilities, their rocket launchers, and many other things. And as time goes by, Hamas feels more of the pressure, and we are preparing for the next stage of operations.
And my final question is, when this ground attack is being planned and scheduled by Israel and the IDF, what about the hostages? Hundreds of them, children, elderly, women. There's no clarity about their whereabouts. People and families are still waiting for their return. Has that really been taken into consideration? What is the plan with regard to that? Negotiations on that front as well?
Yeah, due to the sensitivity of the matter, most of the things I cannot talk about. I can only say that we are fully committed to returning those hostages, men, women, children, babies, elderly people, disabled people, and even a Holocaust survivor. We are fully committed to bringing these people back home to Israel. They are now held hostages by these brutal savages in Gaza, and we will do everything it takes, and no resources will be spared until they are brought back home.
Jonathan, there's definitely what we can see here from India is that this is becoming a multi-front war for Israel. It started with Israel-Hamas, but it's becoming Israel-Hezbollah. It's becoming Israel-Syria too. How does Israel plan to manage that? Because that will mean the deployment of troops and tanks much more than initial focus just on Gaza.
Indeed, the Iranian proxies around us they appear galvanized. And we see lots of incitement and hard talk by the Iranians, and we see attacks by Hezbollah along the Lebanese border. We remain strong, focused. Our focus is on southern Israel, on Gaza. And our message to Lebanon through Hezbollah is that Lebanon, the state of Lebanon, now has to make a choice if they are willing to sacrifice their own safety and well-being at the behest or at the benefit of a bunch of jihadis in Gaza.
Jonathan, I just want to come back to this hospital attack, and I appreciate you explaining from your version as well what Israel has to say, because Palestinian authorities have made it very clear that this was an Israeli airstrike that has killed over 500 people, which means, according to them, including women and children, and there are visuals of people who are injured being rushed into likely another hospital, as it looked like, for injuries. why again has Israel said, and on what basis, what evidence is Israel giving out at this point? Because why I'm asking you that question is that there has been outrage not just among people on social media, but there are leaders, for example, in USA who are from the US Congress. They have come out to blame Israel. They are not backing out from that. So why do you say that this was from Gaza, a misfire, and what is the evidence Israel is putting forth on that?
As I already stated at the beginning of our Q&A session, we are confident after a thorough analysis of our systems, intelligence based on more than one source, that this was in fact a Islamic Jihad rocket that was fired towards Israel and misfired, exploded on the ground and caused the explosion in the hospital. We are confident this has been approved by the highest levels of the IDF. And this is the information that we stand by, contrary to random claims made by terrorist-approved outlets in Gaza, which I think shouldn't be granted that level of veracity that you are granting them. Thank you.
Jonathan, why do you say that? Because I remember there were a lot of people asking for evidence of proof of the massacre of babies, despite Hamas themselves live streaming it for the world to see, including the children and hostages. And now when evidence is being asked with regard to this, is that the reason that you're saying that put them on the same pedestal?
No, I'm simply saying that you shouldn't treat information coming from a terrorist organization the same way that you treat information that comes from a sovereign country and a military.
I appreciate you joining us. Jonathan Conricus is the IDF spokesperson, and he's explaining why Israel is constantly stating now with regard to the hospital attack. Remember, because it is a hospital, and this means deaths of civilians too. And Israel has said it was not our rocket, it was not our missile, that it was from Gaza Strip as well, and they are putting forth radar footage. This has led to a lot of claims and counterclaims this time.